So by the time you were 27, you were buying one property every month, or you'd already hit £1 million worth of property?
By the time I was 27, I'd got £1 million worth of property.
Whoa! Let's put that into context. What's up, guys? I'm Hamilton Keats, and you're watching Azarus TV. Before I tell you this guy's incredible story, I've got a small favor to ask of you. To help me to bring you more great stories like these, please subscribe to the channel. Right, let's get into this. I've got a really exciting interview to share with you. We traveled up to Birmingham to meet with Joe Billingham. Joe started from nothing at the age of 18, and over the last 20 years, he's built billions of dollars worth of real estate. And today, he has 9 projects on the go worth roughly $250 million in total. It really is an incredible story, so stay tuned because Joe's going to be sharing his story and his advice for anyone wanting to get involved in real estate. Let's go.
Joe Billingham, founder and chairman of Prosperity Group. Prosperity is a developer first and foremost. We have a selection of developments across the UK. PDR, which is office conversions into residential, as well as a concentration of new build in Birmingham city centre. And then within the group we've got a lettings and management business, and then Prosperity Wealth, which is our intermediary to interact with both investors, introducers and first-time buyers.
Okay. Now, I first heard your story through a mutual friend of ours, and I thought it was both fascinating and inspiring, which is why I asked you to do this interview. Could you tell us how you got started?
Okay. Well, 18 years old, got an opportunity to work with be a runner basically for a developer. It wasn't really a developer, he was a property trader in Birmingham. So I'd run around collecting contracts, paying the labourers at the end of the week, generally sort of just any sort of odd jobs you needed doing. So it was a good opportunity, a key opportunity, because I think gave me 2 things. One, sort of a base of knowledge about sort of the very sort of simple things around property, but I think also showed me he was a young man, still relatively young man, and he was sort of in his 30s. So he kind of showed me that he had the car, had the house, lovely wife. So kind of, I think it was just that kind of being able to visualise seeing someone that you could relate to, whereas typically I think, growing up, you don't always see those people or get to interact with sort of successful people. So decided that I wanted to have a piece of the property market myself, the property industry. So alongside working for Pete, I started a sandwich round, which was my girlfriend's father came home one night and was complaining about the fact that the canteen in his industrial estate had closed down, and they were having to drive out and get sandwiches. So they were kind of running this sandwich list between them. So I went up a couple of days later and was talking to the guy who owned the site, and then probably a bit different now, but within a kind of half an hour conversation, shook hands with him that I'd got exclusive rights to get onto his industrial estate. That then developed into 4 industrial estates. So it was a kind of a 4 a.m. start, make a couple of 100 sandwiches, load the van up.
And then, was it you making the sandwiches?
Yeah. My girlfriend at the time used to help when she used to get up in the morning, but that didn't last long. So yeah, get up in the morning, make the sandwiches, head out. And then the beauty with that type of business is by kind of 11 o'clock, half 11 maybe, although it's a lunchtime business, but everyone's bought their sandwiches for lunch.
Yeah.
So kind of by, mid-morning, you kind of your day's free. So then I'd kind of by that time I'd got an afternoon job with Pete, and then I was doing some property management work as well for a business that he owned on the Hagley Road in Birmingham. So a combination of sandwiches in the morning, running for Pete until sort of late afternoon, end of play, and then I'd do some property management. So the sandwich van was multi-use.
How many hours a day were you working at this point?
I don't know, it's kind of, it was all kind of just blurs into one really, kind of certainly early mornings through till early evenings and then weekends. So, there was always a skip to fill or, kind of a job to do for Pete, or I was off to buy, the food that I needed for the following week's sandwich run. So, good times.
So how many sandwiches were you selling a day at your peak?
At the peak, we were up to... So 200, I think. 200 was kind of that, 220, 230 was kind of, was the kind of, and then obviously, but then all the confectionery and the drinks and everything that comes with that. And then I used to get some of the businesses that we used to deliver the sandwiches to, they'd ask about if I could do a buffet. So we used to kind of like, so we'd end up doing the sandwiches as well as doing a sort of a buffet. And then,
How long did it take you to kind of reach peak in that business?
It was around 3 years. So, and then the idea was it was never about the sandwiches. Obviously, it was how I was going to get the money to put deposits down on properties.
And I heard you set a goal. Was it to buy one property a month?
Yeah. So I'd set a goal that I wanted £1 million worth of property by the time I was 30. So I worked out that I needed to buy a property every month from kind of my early 20s. And then I'd done that by the time I was 27.
Wow. So by the time you were 27, you were buying one property every month, or you'd already hit £1 million worth of property?
By the time I was 27, I'd got £1 million worth of property.
So Joe went from waking up every morning and making 200 sandwiches at 4 a.m. to achieving his goal 3 years ahead of schedule. Let's move on to his property. And how old were you when you bought your first? 22?
Yeah, I think it was just 20, yeah.
20?
Just 20. I bought a property as a sort of a buy-to-let.
And then by 22, you were doing one a month?
And then by 22, we were kind of well underway then. So, that was the target.
Whilst I remember this, when you were 27, you had £1 million worth of property. How much income were you making on that?
Rule of thumb was probably about £100,000.
So that's passive income, essentially. You're still working?
Yeah. Well, sort of, gross income, and then you've that's probably your gross rent roll, I suppose.
Yeah.
On that type of 10% yield, sort of, that was pretty much the rule of thumb back then.
And you were netting?
Probably 60, I suppose.
And putting it all back into new properties?
Yeah, everything was recycled for probably 10, 15 years.
Wow. Yeah.
It's small margins, but, we're kind of, I wasn't spending much money, put it that way. So everything was going into houses at the time. So then I started buying buy-to-let properties as well as properties to refurbish.
Yeah.
So I'd kind of, I'd have a couple of refurbishments on, and then I'd have a couple of buy-to-lets on. So, to do a mix. And then the properties that I'd buy and sell, those would be the ones that, ultimately would give me a bit more cash then to buy more. So it was the classic sort of, strategy really, sort of just keep moving up really.
Tell me about your first property.
First property was actually a little flat in a converted church in Worcester. So nothing very salubrious.
What were you looking for when you got it?
It was a good buy. I remember it being about 35,000, and then working back on the rent, it was kind of like a 10-12% yield, I'd imagine at the time. That kind of lower value property price point, but you'd still get, even in those days, probably sort of £450 rent a month. So it was a good yield. So and certainly would make income every month. So, but rather than living off that income, the idea was always to have a sustained income from a business, and then just the property then would just be continuously reinvested.
Wow. Now, just to give that bit of perspective, where are you today in terms of property ownership? How much real estate do you own?
I suppose it's probably easier just to probably just talk about the type of schemes that I currently do. Smithfield, for example, is one of our largest schemes, and that's a £250 million development. Just got planning on a 24-storey tower that we start in January, which is a £50 million development. So kind of get an idea of, we've got currently sort of 9 ongoing developments of sort of different sizes, but it gives you an idea of that.
Now, how did you get from 27 years old, £1 million worth of property, to 250 million single commercial development?
Slow process, and you're learning all the time. But I think certainly, if I go back to the point where I started building the portfolio, and then I started working. I'd got sort of my relationships were with estate agents, solicitors, accountants all around Birmingham. But if we go back to that era, it was very much sort of an estate agent or a solicitor or an accountant would know that you were a serious buyer, and rather than it sort of going out into the sort of the open market, you would get the opportunity to have a look at it and make an offer. So it was more of a kind of closed environment really than sort of what we're seeing today. So I would get offered these properties, and then they would be the basis of either the properties that I would refurbish or rent. But I was getting offered too many properties that I could look after myself. So I started introducing those properties to other local dealers, and then obviously local builders that wanted So soon got a reputation for kind of having, being a supplier of good value properties. So started building a client bank, and some of those clients are still with me today. So, where they then started to build their own portfolio. That client bank grew just through word of mouth. So I needed some more stock. So then I decided that the probate line that would produce, say, 25, 30 houses a year, to be able to be sold on. I went to the PLCs, so I started working with Persimmon, Redrow, David Wilson at the time, and went to them and said, look, I've got clients that want to buy property. Can I buy your end of line stock? Can I buy blocks in bulk? So we used to kind of syndicate and then ultimately buy developments or part developments, or there might just be a few random houses from the end of a development marketing campaign, or we might be early on and buying sort of an individual apartment scheme.
And how old were you at this time?
So I'm kind of early 30s now.
Still doing it on your own?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then I built that business to, I think the largest deal I did with Persimmon was 108 houses in one transaction. So we kind of, and those were broken up into clients. So, I suppose a quite similar model to where we are now, really, where investors are getting to buy our developments, where we're the developer. But in those days, they were still getting to buy, a buy-to-let property.
And then so you talked about buying, working with PLCs to get to new deals. What was your first major commercial project?
So the investor appetite was moving quite quickly away from buying assets in the UK, and there was very much a trend at that point to buying property in Spain. So this was then the start of the whole sort of Spanish property market, the Brits buying sort of holiday homes in Spain. So there was quite a lot of people doing the sort of working, selling the Spanish property, and I always liked Cyprus as a good value proposition. So at the time, it was £100,000 for a one-bedroom, sea-facing property in Spain. Whereas in Cyprus they were kind of still 30, 35, 40 for a nice, not relatively nice spec, reasonable size one-bed apartment. So I went to Cyprus and I joint ventured with a landowner there, and between us delivered just over 1,000 properties over 5 years, and that was kind of the first real, sort of one, I suppose, fully fledged developer. With my own cash on the line and delivering product.
How much of your net worth were you risking on those deals?
Probably all of it.
This is the classic empire mindset. It's not the kind of approach to take with risk if you just want a comfortable life, but in Joe's case, he's shooting for something much bigger than himself, and he's willing to risk it all. Can we ask how much it was at that point?
We were it was probably kind of 5 to 7 million type, as a sort of.
So you hustled your way into your mid-30s to £5-7 million, and you put it all on the line for this project?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
Not much has changed.
I love it. And now you mentioned earlier you got 9 projects on the go. Where are they all based?
So it's a mix. So we're about to hand over the HSBC Tower in Southend. We're just starting on a shopping centre conversion in Birkenhead. And then in Birmingham, we're on site on 7th Street, which is an apartment scheme next door to the mailbox. Moseley Street, which is 67 units in Digbeth. And then we've got some developments in Halifax as well. And then the next sort of real push now is working on the sort of key Birmingham sites that we own.
Yeah.
But Prosperity was born then as a fund. So the idea was that we would buy distressed assets out of West Register, which was the toxic arm of RBS. So this would kind of, recession had come, the banks had sort of locked down, a lot of developments were sort of half finished, or there were portfolios of different range of properties from commercial, retail, residential in this sort of toxic arm of RBS. And then the idea was to seed the fund on the back of the capital that we'd made in Cyprus, and then raise further funds to then, with investors, to go out and then buy these half-finished schemes. Still got an active client bank, so we got the exit to be able to sell the developments on completion. So we worked through a couple of half-finished schemes and then bought sort of mixed bags of portfolios across the UK of houses, and then sort of sleeves rolled up and kind of understood whether it was a little terrace that needed a bit of a lick of paint, or it's something that was that bad it just wanted to go into an auction, or something that we could tenant and rent out and take an income from for a few years. So it's kind of just using all the different skills really that we learnt along the way, and then just dissecting the portfolios and just maximising the return on them.
Did you get hit on your own portfolio in 2008?
Yeah, so certainly I never lost any properties. The loan to value was such that there was never really any risk of any intervention from the lenders, and the market obviously was firm from a rental income perspective.
Joe wasn't silly with leverage. He'd used the rental income from the properties to pay down the principal on the mortgage, so he wasn't over leveraged at the height of the property crisis. Instead of just surviving, he actually thrived by taking advantage of all of the distressed assets. What do you think the future looks like for you and for real estate development?
Okay, so currently August 2020, so just coming through COVID, and an uncertain sort of few months or potential few years, I think, from where the economy's going. So that'll be interesting to see. Residential property certainly is, I think, sheltered in some part by just the pure supply and demand in the UK. So in Birmingham we've got a huge undersupply of property, so people have got to live somewhere. I think long-term wise, you've got the affordability factor, as we've seen in London, where it's just sort of property outpricing the local market, and affordability factor. What
advice do you have for people looking to get started with real estate investing?
I think just look at the basics. Buy to let still works. Yes, prices have gone up. Yes, you need a sizable deposit. But I don't know many people, I don't know anyone that's bought property as a long-term investment, and long-term being the key, that's regretted it. I think you need to look at your costs closely, ensure that you can afford to be entering the market. But ultimately, getting a deposit down and just getting started really. I think sometimes we pretty much know what we need to do, but it's just we don't always kind of all feel like we need. Yes, you need information, but I think sometimes you also need to, you need to take some action as well.
Pow! Wow, what a story. Kind of made me feel like I'm not working hard enough. You know what? I think I'm gonna get back to work. Oh wait, before I forget, I've got one favor to ask of you. And I know I sound like a broken record now, but please subscribe to this channel and like this video. It gives me more leverage to get more Joes. We all need a mentor, and if we bring people like Joe onto the channel, they get to mentor thousands of you at once. That's a wrap. Now, what's the best deal you've ever done?
The best deal I've ever done? Well, I suppose I'm looking forward and I'm looking toward. Certainly, I think our best deals are to come. So sites that we own now, I think will be fantastic projects, and I think moving away from the kind of the profitability on schemes, which is obviously key for our investors and us, and obviously schemes being commercial. But I think as the business evolves and as you evolve as a developer, it's also the type of schemes that you're delivering, and then the type of projects that you can deliver into your home city, really.
What's the worst deal you've ever done?
Well, there's a standout, and it's a funny one because it's not purely as a bad deal from a development perspective. So we bought a couple of large buildings in Keighley, and we worked with our partner ALB, and they converted them into residential units. So they were delivered to size, to specification, to price. I mean, to put things in perspective, these were £60,000 one-bedroom apartments and £70,000 two-bedroom apartments. So it was never going to be Mayfair, but they were a good, sound property with a strong potential for income. We were let down by a partner that was due to lease them back from us. So kind of nearing delivery, we'd got sort of 200 units pretty much in the middle of Keighley without an obvious partner for the lettings. And that was where Lamont was born, Lamont, our in-house lettings and management business. So we set up Lamont on the very basis that would never happen again, because I think certainly our clients had quite significant delays in starting to generate income.
So you took what could have been a disaster and actually turned it into a new business opportunity for yourself.
Yeah, driven more so from a kind of client-facing perspective. So it wasn't purely driven from a commercial perspective. It was driven from the fact that if we are providing property as a developer, it's the whole journey for us. So we're not just a developer. So someone that's buying a property from us, if they're buying a prosperity property, we want to be able to facilitate them on the mortgage. We want to facilitate them on the lettings and management, and the lettings and management's key. So really, the real journey starts at delivery. So we can do our bit as the developer, but the real journey for a client and their experience is the day-to-day management and making that as painless as possible, really.